All right, who else? Who else wants some work for Thanksgiving? Come on, let's have some other hands. Anybody else? Where'd you go?
St. Louis.
Is that where you from?
Yeah, that one.
How was St. Louis
It was alright. Fine.
compared to Chicago? What do
So,
you
it was a little bit more, like, 2 or 3 degrees.
Did you get some St. Louis barbecue? Who here thinks Thanksgiving food is overrated? Yeah, like, I'm kind of tired of eating the same stuff all the time. I think next year I want to do like a cultural, multicultural Thanksgiving, like get food from all over the place. All right, I'm gonna start off with just a quick lecture on psychological disorders, so we could, this is a very big one for the class. You know, most people, when they think of psychology, think of disorders, and stuff, how to treat, diagnose, etc. But group one, you guys ready? Is group one ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll make this short, just a brief introductory. I'll go to, how long you think you guys' presentation is in total? Estimate.
Probably like around like I don't even know that we didn't really we just type things.
Okay.
We just see how long.
How many slides you got in total?
12.
12 slides, okay, so, yeah, I'd say roughly about 20 minutes. Maybe about a minute and a half a slide or something. Take your time too, right? The point of also coming up here is to also give you experience as you move through college of public speaking and talking. Was an extremely great arsenal to have. Because as you go get jobs, right, and they put you into groups and teams, you're gonna be talking in front of people. You wanna be confident and, take your time, convey your thoughts. So as you come up here and present, how do I want you to think, right? This is a course about psychology. So this is a course about, hey, our behavior. What is my typical behavior? Am I gonna stall? Is my voice gonna crack? Am I afraid what people think of me? And all these different things. For one time only, try not to exhibit that will be your normal behavior. Like, hey, I think I'm kind of afraid to talk in front of the class, right? What people think of me, how I look, how I dress. So this is an experimentation also on how to kind of walk through life being very confident, speaking with people, right? Without caring too much about what they perceive of you, but rather the content that you're giving to them, right? Probably at some point in the future, I have plans, maybe in the next 4 years or so, to run for some public office, maybe United States Senator, or probably Congress for the United States. So I'll have a big face out there, right? And so, obviously I'll be criticized and scrutinized for all sorts of things. But the point is not to care too much about that, but rather like, what do you bring to the table? What kind of changes you're trying to make for people? How you're trying to help people with benefits, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, this experimentation. So as you come up here, be very confident in what you're talking about. Take your time. No one's in a rush. We got time. And I think you guys will do great. After class, if there's any other issues with groups or people in groups, come up, talk to me. I'll try to communicate, get it resolved. But I don't think it should be too difficult to, get this done. Okay. The big one, right? Everybody thinks of psychology as disorders. Hey, I want to know about, my mom's issues, my issues. Why am I depressed, anxiety, schizophrenic? I know people that talk to themselves. People are locked up in facilities, people locked up in prison systems, et cetera, for exhibiting behavior that are disorderly, right? So this is what we're going to get into today, just briefly, so we can kind of just simply, elementary level, understand what the heck is a disorder, right? Well, first of all, how do you guys perceive a disorder? Who here knows somebody who has a disorder, a psychological disorder? Do you know a few people? Whoever, or just one person in particular? Do you mind saying what kind kind of disorder this individual would have.
I have some friends with, ADHD, and have ADHD, borderline personality disorder.
Okay.
Anxiety.
Yeah. Okay, which I think, I'd say is sort of the typical, right? We would say ADD, ADHD, anxiety. For you guys, it's probably a lot more than me. You know what I mean? Because of you were actually born into technology. Therefore, you know nothing else, right? I can talk about it all day, how it was when I was a kid or whatever, but it doesn't matter. That's not your reality. That's not your experience. You guys are bombarded with information, right? And now it's just become part of life. It's like, not a big deal, but it is a big deal, right? And it manifests itself, right? It will if you are honest with yourself about your mental states and things of that nature. So it may be, you know, the ADHDs in you guys' generation that's very prevalent, ADD, but those could be actually part of, you know, the technologies, too much of it, right? We're born into it, so obviously from day one, your parents gave you tablets and too much TV and distractions and all this stuff. Who else? Who else knows someone? Yes, you mind just saying what kind of disorder individual or individuals will have?
BPD.
BPD, borderline personality disorder. Okay, so we see that's becoming common. Anyone else?
Once I used to work at, the one customer would always tell me to get schizophrenia. So
Okay.
he would always be like writing on napkins and kind of like talking to himself in his own way.
Okay. Was it still functional? Could he still do the job?
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't working, he was one of the customers.
Oh, it was a customer.
Yeah, but I mean, you could have a conversation before like a little bit.
Before it deviates into something else.
Yeah.
So you have limited time. Who else? Right? And think we all could be suffering from something that could be kind of disorder, right? Because sometimes the stuff is very gray and things are not incurable, right? Some things can be cured, right? It's not something that can be permanent, right? It's things that can be helped, and that's part of therapy, you know, that's part of psychoanalysis, all these different things we kind of heard about leading up to this. So some a very simple understanding, right? Someone say, what the heck is a disorder of any kind? Picture this in your mind. Grades, income, anything you want to put in statistical basis. That's it, right? So we're just in a distribution, a bell curve or something, where the average person gets C's, some people get F's, some people get A's. But on the average, which would mean normal, people for the most part are somewhere here. You're like, oh, okay, this big blob here, all right, people normally probably get B's or somewhere of like between here, right? Anything outside of that normal, we would say is a disorder when it comes to our behavior, right? Anything just outside of normal. Now we say this could change over time, because normal just means we live in a society with values, rules, and just kind of a way of doing things, right? So we have a Bible for psychoanalysis and disorders and things like this to diagnose and to treat, and to have criteria based on the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, right, which is essentially our Bible. And it gives all sort of specific criteria in order to meet a disorder, which means you may have behaviors going on with you that don't actually mean you have a disorder, right? That means that something is just out of whack for now, but you still function. So in essence, a disorder is anything going on with you behaviorally, emotionally, that throws you out of this order and throws others. So it annoys the heck out of everybody else, right? So in this room, let's say we have somebody who had to scream every 5 minutes. We're like, okay, there's something that's abnormal happening in this room with this individual. abnormal behavior to others, right? And we ask the person, hey, does that bother you? Right now, it don't really bother me. Oh, but it still bothers other people, bothers society, right? And so even talking about with the guy with schizophrenia, right? He may not think that anything's wrong. He say, I'm perfectly fine. It doesn't bother me. I still go to work. I still pay my bills. He's like, hey, it doesn't work when it comes to other people, right? So this, we want to think of disorders as just not some monolithic thing that sort of like media kind of puts out there or things that you've heard from other people. But understand that this is very flexible unless it truly impacts you, right? You can no longer function in a normal way. You can't go to work. You can't do your homework. You don't get proper sleep, right? You can't get stuff done, which we would call as like maladaptive behavior. Like, hey, it's impeding my growth as a human being in society. Whatever I'm going through, my depression, my anxiety, but it's stopping my actual normal growth as a person. Like, oh, okay, something is disorderly happening to you. Or we say it's stopping everyone else, right? It's really bothering everyone else around you. It's like, okay, there may be something of a disorder happening, possibly, but you have to meet specific criteria. So this is how we want to understand disorders, not just like everybody, thinks everybody has a disorder of some sort, But in order to have a true diagnosis, we have to say, hell, you have to really truly understand the behavior with the person themselves, how it impacts them, and the behavior with others, how it bothers them. All right, so we're going to cover basic concepts of psychological disorders, anxiety disorders, which is huge, right? Huge. We all have anxiety. Who doesn't have anxiety? But does it cover cross the threshold to a disorder, right? Obsessive compulsive, post-traumatic stress, major depressive disorder, bipolar, schizophrenia, and other disorders. All right, disorder syndrome marked by a clinically significant disturbance in the individual's cognition, emotion, regulation, or behavior. Remember we said basically throwing out of like, not homeostasis, not normal, right? Your function is being affected, right? Your emotions, your thinking, you can't think straight, right? You're too emotional. You can't regulate your emotions. You can't get control of them. Your behavior is not typical. It's just atypical behavior for normal people. Like we said, this can evolve over time as cultures change and new things become normal, right? The DSM, the first two additions to the DSM, and I talked about this manual, right? They said basically homosexuality was basically like a disease, right? Classified that basically like a disease. Now, as society changed over time, right? I think we're on the fifth one to sixth edition of the manual. We say no, right? That was really a cultural thing, whether people accept things or not, what other people do or think or feel, what they want to do with, et cetera, et cetera. So as culture evolves, so does this manual, which means it never ends. It's always going to be a work in progress. It's never a finite book, right? It's never going to end. It's just we're constantly learning. We're constantly expanding it. Which means when it comes to ADD, ADHD, I know a ton of younger people diagnose that, right? We can say, hey, there's probably an overdiagnosis of it and the over treatment of it too, which means there's probably something else going on, but this just seems to be the trend. Which means we haven't caught up yet probably to like, hey, there's a lot of technology and a lot of people are using it to function. Obviously, there's a lot of distractions about things. It could be impacting them, but it could be something else too, associated with that. We'll talk about that too. Going back to associative learning, right? And classical conditioning, operant conditioning stuff, like how we start to associate things with other things. Right, so it needs to be dysfunctional, impedes your function, or maladaptive, right? Impedes your adaptive growth as a person to move forward and keep going. And often accompanied by distress. Any questions so far? All right, some biological influences, right? Our evolution, right? We've evolved, we've changed. You got buildings and transportation and structures, right? I got a job, you got the concept of time, right? You have the concept to be everywhere at a certain time. We've evolved, right? So we've added a lot more things. Individual genetics, right? Hey, my mom had the same sort of biological information inside of her. That biological information passed on to me. And now I exhibit similar behaviors that she does, right? And then brain structure and chemistry, right? Is something wrong with your brain structure? Did something happen? Did you have an injury? Something happened in vitro, you know, in utero, I would say, or something after the fact. Or your brain chemistry, something's off, right? You're not producing a hormone as much as you should. You're producing too less of a hormone of some sort, or too much of some sort, right? Psychological influences, right? Stress, trauma, learned helplessness, mood-related perceptions, and memory, right? Depression, you're like, hey, there's no hope. Why do I even worry about tomorrow? Why do I even bother? Like, well, it could have been learned, right? You could have taken on that mindset from people you've been around growing up with, or people that you're currently around, right? Very negative people. So you're learning from them. Or some trauma. You say, hey, Professor Ross, something happened. You know, when I was a kid, this happened. When I was a kid, my brother scared me, just jumped out the tree, and now I'm afraid of trees. I have a phobia, right? I was watching a movie at too early of an age, and now clowns, I have a phobia of clowns. I was watching a clown movie when I was 3 years old that I shouldn't have been watching. I was watching It, or something like that. Right, you face some sort of trauma. There's something associated to an event that happened that leads to what could possibly lead to a disorder later on in life. Or mood-related perceptions and memories, right? Which means like your mood is dictated on how you perceive a certain environment, right? The energy in the environment, people, how they function. Now your mood, they're angry all the time, right? Think about that, there's, you know, a lot of linkages to poverty that I say to mood. So you'd be like, hey, why is it so violent over in this neighborhood? You're like, why is it so violent? Right? You're like, well, violent is a tool of language over there. It's the form of communication, right? If you go to a neighborhood, they don't communicate that way. They don't communicate with hitting each other, fighting, shooting, stabbing, beating, right? They don't do that. That's not how they communicate. There's a different standard. So it shows that, you know, even poverty is linked to bad moods. So you're like, why are the people so bad in this neighborhood? Guess what? Because they're angry. Why are they angry? Because they're poor. They don't have a job, right? They have nothing to do productive. They have something to, they have idle minds and worrying about how to survive that day, right? What are they gonna eat? How are they gonna eat? How do they make money? How do they pay their rent? How do they do this? So mood-related perceptions and also memories, right? Memories are very keen because we go back and we think on stuff and we get irrational about, hey, I wish I could have changed the past. If only I went left instead of right, right? If this hadn't happened in high school or primary school, et cetera, et cetera. And then some socio-cultural influences also lead to disorders, such as our roles, right? Hey, what role do you play in society? Right? Maybe as a man, you say, hey, I'm a man, I'm a husband, and I must protect, I must provide, and must give, bust my butt to go to work to provide and take care of all the stuff. And if anything falls from that, you lose your job, you get laid off or something, right? Now you're no longer the provider, right? Maybe your wife has to go out and work, and now you may feel less of a man or have a lot of anxiety. Now you're depressed, you go down a rabbit hole, now you could be clinically classified as having some sort of, you know, depression disorder of some sort. So if you talk about expectations, hey, what are your expectations as a person in society, your role as a child? Maybe you have a sick parent that you gotta take care of, you know? You're like, hey, this is too much. I can't keep taking care of mom or dad. or grandma or grandpa, right? It's giving me too much anxiety, so much anxiety, I can't function with the other stuff I gotta do in life. So now I'm maladaptive. And definitions of normality and disorder, which is cultural. What is normal, right? Do you wanna be normal? I don't know, maybe some people are like, I don't wanna be normal, some atypical, so you may not have a disorder. Right, I don't know, they might clinically diagnose you with that because you're atypical. But you may like it, you may be super creative, you may paint as good as Monet, right? Or draw, or whatever. Right? Maybe a genius of some sort, in some facet. Classifying and labeling people, right? Classification aims to predict the disorder's future course, suggest appropriate treatment, and prompt research. Yes, we have to classify people as part of society, right? Just so we can predict, we gotta put people in a bottle, put them in a column of some sort, in order to associate how we're gonna treat people who have a particular domain of behavior. DSM, right? APA. The APA is the largest sort of group that oversees really all the research in psychology, right? So if you become a psychologist, typically you join the APA, American Psychological Association. And you go do conferences and talk about your particular interests in the field. And then above that, we have the ICD, right? So the ICD kind of works with all countries, and that's part of like the United Nations. So even with COVID, kind of like, hey, the World Health Organization, right? Like, what are they saying? Not just here in the United States, but what are they saying around the world about a particular virus or disease, right? We need information from everywhere, right? Not just from America, we need it from all over the world so we can try to understand an issue, a disorder, some sort of disease from a global perspective. Right? So here in the United States, we got the CDC. Like, oh, what did the CDC say? Well, above that, all countries get together and they have the WHO, right? World Health Organization. They do the International Classification of Disease, which essentially this would be like, hey, American, this is global. Right? How to classify things, what are symptoms and stuff like that. And then the RDOC, you don't really need to know that and stuff unless you start doing research, or you want to read about research dealing with disorders, right? The National Institute of Mental Health. All right, some changes in the MANGO, right? Autism and Asperger's syndrome. Autism spectrum disorder, spectrum, huge. Like, oh, this person's on the spectrum. What's it mean? They got some components of that. Don't mean they have it, right? You're just exhibiting some things that make a fit into that, right? Very broad. Right? We used to call people who had intellectual disabilities, call them mentally retarded. Now we find out that it's very offensive to people. Either that's your child, brother, your mother, you know? So now language is important. You know, we all want to say what we want to say, but language is extremely important because it affects people. It's a reality, right? Now we call it intellectual disability. Hoarding disorders and binges, right? Eating disorder addict. Which means like, you know, you can watch a show, forget Discovery Channel, I think it was. Hoarders. Anybody ever seen Hoarders? Well, you could say, hey, we've popularized something, and now we have an image of it, right? Television production of some sort. Now it becomes offensive. And people who actually have the disorder back now, I don't really want to be classified as that. We got something that's kind of more appropriate, right? Scientifically, socially, something a little bit more appropriate to just binges and disorders. So for eating, we just call it eating disorder. Some criticisms, right? None of this stuff was without criticism. Think of this, you guys are intellectuals. Nothing is without criticism. which means that you guys need to come up with some original thoughts. Yeah, you're gonna listen to professors all day for the next 4 years. What do you think about the subject? What is your theory? Give me a theory. Give everybody a theory in your class. Right, have a theory about that. Yeah, let me hear it. Right? Or you're just gonna say, I'm just gonna eat up what you say, Professor Ross. No, I have some original thoughts. I thought about this. Awesome, you should do some research and do a paper, publish a paper. You might get a Nobel Prize for your awesome thought or idea. That's what being an academic is. And I don't think truly, I'll end off here, but I'm gonna say this, because as we get near to the end of the course, I don't think when I first came to college, I knew what the heck college was for, right? Now you're trying to be an academic, you're trying to be scholarly in some field that you want to be interested in. But literally, college, if used properly, is to say, I have theories of my own, and I want to contribute to what's already there, known about something. We already got that stuff. We got books and everything we could look up. What the heck are you gonna add? What real, true, original idea you have, and can you apply it in a scientific way? Could you do an experiment? Could you do a study? Could you do something? And publish it for other people to learn about it, right? Or at least talk about it, I would say. And therefore, you stop becoming an observer of everything, and you become like, hey, you stop sitting in the sands of the stadium. And you're like, no, I wanna actually play. Oh, you wanna play down on the court? You don't just wanna keep buying a ticket and watch and eat popcorn? No, I wanna actually play in the game. That's what college should be. So the point is to play in the game, have some thoughts, have your own theories, because most of the stuff is theoretical, right? This is not math, which is 1 + 1 = 2. This is very fluid things. Things are dynamic that change over time, right? So as you move forward through college, as they really say hey, I have a theory, I have an idea, I have a concept about something that I thought about. And I think you'd be highly more respected. And you'll understand too, that'll lead to other things too. And that's what truly makes an academic, right? All right, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna let you guys get your, group one's gonna come present, and then we're gonna end off there.